Hey there, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Redeeming Time. I'm Pastor Vail of the Bible Believing Baptist Church, and I do appreciate that you've taken the time to watch this broadcast. If you'd like, you can check us out on our church webpage at bbbc.us, at bbbc.us, and on that website, if you go to the click of media, and you can find there, you can actually listen in and see one of our recent services and messages on Sunday morning. And I invite you to go ahead and do that. You could also check out some other Redeeming Time episodes that are there. But I encourage you to check it out. And if you'd like, give us a call. We'd be glad to assist you in any way that we possibly can. Today, I encourage you to read Psalm 127. This is a great psalm. This is a foundational psalm that we need to take hold of, that I need to take hold of. And if I pay attention to what it says, it'll bless my heart and help me, and it'll help you as well. It is essential to our walk. And this Psalm 127 was used at the presidential inauguration of Dwight David Eisenhower, and also was used by George Washington. He had his Bible open to this Psalm 127. Psalm 127 says this: "Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. It is vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for so he giveth his beloved sleep." Then he proceeds to say, "Lo, children are a heritage from the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. As arrows in the hands of the mighty man, so are children of one's youth. Happy is a man who has his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate." This psalm, let me break it down this way: except the Lord build it, protect it, and bless it, their labor is in vain. In the book of Habakkuk, it gives us an illustration of what happens if the Lord does not build it. In the book of Haggai, in the book of Haggai, it starts out, "Because they neglected the Lord, and they did not seek Him, they were not entreating Him to be a part of things." It says, "Now therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways." He says, "You have sown much, and you bring in little. You eat, but you have not enough. You drink, but you're not filled with drink. You clothe yourself, but there is none warm. And he that earneth wages to put it into a bag of holes. You looked for much, and lo, it came to little. When you brought it home, I did blow upon it. Why, saith the Lord of hosts? Because mine house it is waste, and you run every man into his own house." And he goes ahead and says, "I called for a drought upon the land and upon all the labor of your hands." God basically is saying, if I don't build it, if I don't protect it, if I don't bless it, it's all in vain. And many of us could say that we've had times that it just looked like we worked hard to earn the money, and by the time the money came in, then something else happened and it just went away. It's just like putting money in a bag with holes. Well, that's exactly what God is saying here. Except the Lord build a house, all that hard work, all that labor is in vain. And that's what he is illustrating there. And so it was. Yeah, but if the Lord does build a house, and that's the advice that is being given by David to Solomon and God to us, if the Lord is involved in building the house, then He will provide the substance you need and the people you need to do the work. We found that here in this work. When God put this work together, I've got no questions except the Lord build a house. This place would not have existed. I came here and it was a cellar. And it was a cellar with an outhouse, no water, no facilities, no nothing. Only had insulation, no sheetrock. And so we started on the cash principle. God provided many things. I'll just tell one, that when it came time that we were ready to put siding on the church, we knew we wanted white vinyl siding, but we didn't have the means, no money, or anything. And that these events happened within a period of 3 days, each of the other. We got word from somebody that there was a person who had a house that had green faded sided. They had an insurance settlement, and they had all this white vinyl siding. They decided they would sell it. At the same time, the Gloucester Bible Church got in touch with me, and they told me we've done something that we have never done before. We've set aside $1,100 to invest in the building of the work there in Gray. And I said excitedly, I called up the guy who is doing our contracting work, and I asked him, I said, "How much is a white vinyl siding?" And he said, $50 a square. I said, "How many square do we need?" And he said, "We need forgot. Anyway, but the same amount that we needed for the $1,100. For $1,100, we were able to buy just exactly the amount of siding that we needed to do that. $1,100 came in, The siding cost $1,100, and it all came within a period of a few days. God provided that. God not only provided the material, but God provided people. Can you imagine a couple in their retirement years? They're ready to sit back and to enjoy life, and they come to the place. There's a little church. It's a cellar, and they have an outhouse, and they have nothing, and they walk through the back doors of the church. Only one door. They walk through the doors, and they're invited to come in, and God moves upon their heart and said, this is where I want you to settle in and go to work. And Charlie and Phyllis Bragdon came and became a part of this ministry, an essential part of this ministry, and the growth and foundational part of it. How did that happen? Except the Lord build a house, they labor in vain that build it. We could have worked and labored, but if God doesn't touch it and God doesn't do it, it's in vain. So God provided the material, and God provided the people, and God provides, and that's only one of many stories. So He builds it, He protects it, He blesses it, and the blessings of God come. And it says, that talks about the children are a blessing from the Lord. Children are the blessing that comes from the Lord, and they are His reward. God blesses His people with their children. Children are to be a blessing. Properly trained, they become great defenders of the family. It talks about they're like the arrows in the hands of a mighty man. If a person follows God's counsel, God's direction, and raising his family, doing things the way God says to do it, then he'll have a family that will rise up to be defenders from those without. Not only from those without, he'll defend from those within, because the next verse it talks about happy is the guy because they are there defending him in the gates, in the court of public opinion. They are His personal advocates and representatives. These are the blessing that comes from doing things God's way. And a further example of that is when I get something to put together. And what my normal tendency has been is that I'll take and I'll set the instructions aside, and I'll sit down and start to figure out how to put this thing together, thinking I know how to do it on my own. And then after a while, I've got it all messed up, all confused, extra parts, and doesn't work. Then I pick up the instruction. After all else fails, then I get the instructions. Well, God says, hey, start from the beginning. Allow me to be a part of the instructions, and let me give you instructions and follow that, and it'll work. Or we can try to do it our own way. And when we do, we find ourselves in trouble. So the lesson here is it's the same lesson that we were taught as children. When we come to the railroad tracks, you need to stop. Before we go anywhere, we need to stop. And then you what? You need to look. And then you do what? Then you listen. And then you proceed with caution. And so it is with any project, be it a family, be it a marriage, be it a business, be anything that we do. We need to first stop. Before we do anything, stop. And we need to look to God and to His Word. We need to listen to the counsel that He gives, and then we need to proceed. It is essential then, in anything to work, anything. If you don't want your labor to be in vain, then it is essential that we recognize Him from the very beginning of any project or any plan that we set out to do. And not only recognize Him, but then to request Him. To recognize Him is consistent with the first commandment of the 10 Commandments. It says to love the Lord above everything, to recognize Him. And then to request Him to give wisdom and guidance and direction. Request Him to guide us, to grant to us wisdom, understanding, direction, and grace to follow through. And when we do that, we will find these things, that we can build it, He'll protect it, and He'll bless it. We have a house to build. We have a city to keep. We have a seed to raise. And it is essential that we seek the Lord, for except the Lord build a house, they labor in vain that build it. He promised to hear us and to give us direction. I close this segment with this story that was told to me of a woman, of an apple tree. And she said she was sitting in the choir, and the plate was passed by, and she only had $1. Years ago, $1, a lot of money. That's all she had. And the plate went by the first time, she didn't put it in. And it stopped the second time in her lap. And she had $1, and she said, okay, Lord, she put in that $1. That's all she had. So I don't know how I'm going to make it now from this day forward. And she went home a different way. And as she said, as she was walking home, she looked down on the ground, there was something green. And she reached over, she picked it up, and what did she find? She found $2 bills. $2 bills. God rewarded her. She gave her last $1, and He in turn gave her $2, and He has sustained her and taken care of her. I simply say, except the Lord build a house, they labor in vain that build it. So let us entreat Him, let us seek Him, and let us start with Him. Stop, I say, whatever you're doing, look, listen, and then proceed with caution in obedience unto God. Folks, read Psalm 127. May God speak to your heart, and may it encourage you to stop, look, and listen, because I know that except the Lord build the house, we labor in vain that build it. God bless. Have a great day.